When you visit here, do you see the cabins made of yellow cedar? Each line of the bow made by hand. Can you catch the smell of sawdust? The steam box as it heats cedar to be bent into a curve. These boats hold stories about knowledge carried across oceans, each a unique window into history. Fishermen and boat builders from coastal Japan brought woodworking tools and techniques across the ocean to build a new and better life. From Steveston to the north shore of Vancouver and all the way up the coast in the Fraser River, families set up boatworks along rivers and coastlines. Their boats were expressions of connections to different regions of Japan, adapted to BC waters. Japanese-Canadian boat builders were innovators, designing planing hulls that were faster and creating lures and flashers that opened up the sockeye fishery to trolling. The Nikkei fleet was the heart of the salmon industry. Most boat builders owned their buildings, but leased the land from the canneries. By 1919, there were at least 20 Japanese-Canadian boatworks on the Steveston waterfront. The Kishi family boatworks and dry dock were like an assembly line with skilled shipwrights practicing a well-honed craft inherited from their families. They stored up to 90 boats at a time, all in various stages of construction or repair. George Seishi Mukai owned the only private, independent boatworks in Steveston. He was also a fisherman and would go up and down the Pacific coast looking for fish and wood. Knot-free, old-growth, edge-grain red cedar for the sides and yellow cedar for the stern. He would do sea trials with every boat, and he kept his business small, employing only 3 shipwrights and building less than 5 boats a year, many of which were made for indigenous fishermen. He operated Mukai Boatworks more as an art form than a business. Yet, while Japanese Canadians were sought after for their boat building skills and made up at least 80% of Steveston's population, they were increasingly discriminated against. It was a brutal time of racism and bigotry. With World War II and the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, every day racism against Japanese Canadian citizens became part of a government-sanctioned policy of internment. In a matter of hours, the Royal Canadian Navy cancelled 2,090 fishing licenses and then impounded 1,137 boats. These boats were turned over to the Japanese Fishing Vessel Disposal Committee. Some sank, many were repainted and sold to the canneries or given to the Canadian Admiralty. Nets, fishing gear, and boatworks were all sold at rock-bottom prices. Many people profited from the cheap gear and dramatically reduced competition on the water. The Lubzinski brothers took over the Kishi Boatworks, and Marshall and Markstrom occupied Seishi Mukai's business. The Kishi family interned at Christina Lake, used what tools they had been allowed to bring with them to continue boat building, sending the commissioned boats out by rail. Many other Japanese-Canadian families found ways to continue making boats through internment. The Mukai family were made to work as laborers on sugar beet farms in Alberta, where they were paid next to nothing. George Seishi's wife, Sadako Frances Mukai, babysat 4 kids while also working in the fields. George Seishi worked construction jobs on the side. Moving 11 times during internment, they dreamed of returning to Steveston and to their boatworks. On April 1, 1949, 4 years after the war ended, Japanese Canadians were finally able to move freely again in Canada. Many never returned to their communities. Those who did were determined to start over and called this shigatanai, translated as "it cannot be helped." The Kishi family returned to Steveston. The cannery owner remembered Yoichi Jim Kishi and gave him a shop and some land for a small cost. And he started his business anew. Like the Kishi family, the Mukai family also returned to Steveston. George Seishi offered to buy back his boatworks, but Marshall and Markstrom asked for a price much higher than the $12,000 he had saved during internment. He went to the bank, but because he was Japanese-Canadian, was refused a loan. For a few years, he rented out space from the Britannia shipyard complex and eventually opened a new boatworks in his backyard. He continued to build boats into his 90s. The Japanese-Canadian community continues to build boats with many boatworks. Adapting to changing technologies, boat builders have moved from wood to fiberglass, aluminum, and steel boats. Yet, these wooden boats live on. They carry stories of invention and determination, of craftsmanship that yielded hard-won respect, memories of loss, of lives dispossessed, of community resiliency, about hopes for a different future. Together, they insist that we remember the people and communities that built them, and they ask us to understand that we are a part of their inspirational story and that we carry them with us into the future.